Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing a spring egg decor piece. For today's project, I used this clear fillable egg that I got online from a party supply website. I will link it in the comments, and I'm also going to use these two curtain rings that I thrifted. I'm going to first pull the little screw-in hooks out, and then I am envisioning these stacked on top of each other like a little stand that's going to go underneath our egg, so it's going to prop it up and give it a little bit more height and a little bit more grandeur. I'm thinking almost like one of those Fabergé eggs. So I'm going to take my Gorilla Super Glue Gel and I'm going to add some glue around the rim of one of them and put the other one on top. When that's dry, I'm going to add some glue to the bottom of our Easter egg. I have the two pieces together so that I can be sure that they are standing as straight as I would like. I'm then going to prime my surface with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. You can see that I have taken the lid off. We don't need that right now. And I'm going to apply the primer using a sponge so that I don't get any brush strokes. And I'm going to be doing 2 coats of this to prime this properly. I'm then going to be using Redesign's new Salon de la Play mold, and I'm dusting the design that I want to use with cornstarch, and then I'm going to take some of my dust air dry clay and I'm going to work it into this design. This is such a beautiful, intricate design, and I am going to have to be very gentle when I am taking it out of the mold. You always want to go quite slow when you're doing this. If you really struggle, it has also been suggested that you pop it in the freezer for about 10 minutes and that makes getting it out a little bit easier, or you could use resin. So I'm going to flex that mold once I'm ready to take it out, and then I'm going to flip it over and bend that mold back as it starts to release. So gravity is definitely helping me here, but I'm also just going really slow, gently pulling out any little bits that are trying to stick in place, and as you can see, it is coming out quite nicely. Once I have my casting out, I'm going to add some of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue. I'm going to actually add it to the surface of our egg because obviously this design is so delicate. I just want to make sure there's lots of glue down there to hold it in place. So I'm positioning it where I want it to go, and then I am gently manipulating it to the shape of the egg. So there are going to be some sections that I'm going to need to trim off just to make it fit. So I'm then going to take my palette knife and I'm going to trim off the excess down the bottom. And again, just adjusting it, making sure everything's in place. And then I did decide to take that little bow off because we're going to reposition it. So I'm going to remove that. And then once I have done that, I am also going to pull the two bits together a little bit more, and then I'm going to cut off the excess that I don't want from the bow, that little bit that's hanging down in the center. We don't need that, that will just obscure the design. So I'm taking that off, and then I'm going to be adding some glue to the back of that bow and gluing that up the top. I'm then going to dust just part of that same mold with cornstarch, and I'm going to work my clay into the lovely little florals there. So remember, you can just use bits and pieces of your molds to suit whatever project you have. So I've worked my clay in, and then I am going to gently flex that mold and pull the design out. I am then going to add some glue to the back, and we're going to arrange this casting around the little curtain hoops that we've added to the base. So we're just going to dress those up and make it look more like a seamless piece. I'm going to continue casting those until I have the entire first ring covered, and then I did cast the opposite florals on that mold, so we had a little bit of design variation, and I'm going to glue that underneath just to go around the bottom. While that's drying, I'm going to take some of this styrofoam board and I'm going to trace around the top of the egg. This is going to give me some rough measurements, and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut this out. This is quite a messy task. Make sure you're doing this somewhere that you can have some easy cleanup, but we're going to be using this as a base, and I like to use this where I can because I get a lot of it having a shop, and I don't like just throwing it out. It just seems really wasteful. So I'm just double checking here that I have the correct size, and then I'm going to take my hot glue gun and add some glue around the rim, and then I'm going to press it into the base of our egg. I'm then going to take my glue gun and just fill in some of those gaps around the edges. I'm then going to take some of Paint Couture's crust texture, and I'm going to pull some of that out and put it in a plastic container. I'm then going to add a few drops of Paint Couture's Pinecone chalk paint and pitch black chalk paint and mix them together to create a dark brown. And then I'm going to start adding that over the top of our styrofoam. I really want this to look like dirt. I want to add some forest moss over the top, and if I didn't do this step, you would be able to see peaks of that styrofoam underneath. And also I like the idea of having a little bit of texture peeking up through as well. So I'm going to cover that entire base there, and then once I have that entire section covered, I just used my palette knife and just dabbed it to create a little bit of texture to make it look more like dirt. I then let that dry. While that's drying, I'm going to work on this little bird. I will link where I got that in the comments, and I'm going to prime it with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. After my 2 coats of primer are dry, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm going to paint the entire little bird with 2 coats and then let it dry. I'm then going to take Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to add it over our little bird. I really want to work this into all of the details on this sweet little statue. Ordinarily, I would often seal my piece, but because we're working on such a small area, I'm not having any trouble coming in with my wet wipe now and wiping back the excess. When that's dry, I'm going to take Vertigreen Antiquing Glaze, and I'm going to work that into some of the details and pull it back. I really want this to be a bit reminiscent of moss on a statue. While my bird is drying, we're going to turn our attention back to the base. I'm going to take Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm going to apply an even coat of that over the top of our dry crust medium. Now, if you've used this before, you will know that Crackle Step 1 dries to a tacky and sticky finish. I want something that's going to hold down all of my Spanish moss. There's a lot of different little pieces. So once this is dry, it will be sticky enough to hold that in place. So once it's dry and it's sticky, I'm going to take some of that forest moss and I'm going to start spreading it out on the base. I just thought this was a better idea than super glue or wood glue. Remember, you can also use Crackle Step 1 for gold leafing as well. It's quite a versatile product. Once I was happy with the forest moss coverage, I took this little nest that I got online and I'm just pulling it out a little bit. I want it to be a bit bigger, so I'm loosening that up and just checking that I'm happy with how it looks with the bird. I'm checking that my moss isn't going to come falling out, that it's all stuck down, and then I'm going to add some Gorilla Super Glue gel to the bottom of the nest and put it in the center. Then when that's dry, I took these little eggs that I made by rolling up some air dry clay, and I'm just going to add some of that antiquing glaze to give them a bit more of a duller finish, more like real eggs would be in a nest. And then I'm going to add some glue to the bottom of our little bird, glue that in place. And then I'm also going to glue the little eggs to sit just near the little bird. I've got the bird sitting off center because I like to sort of see the profile of the bird a little bit more. Once the glue was dry, I took some more of my Gorilla Super Glue gel and I ran it along the seam where the top part of the egg meets the bottom, and then I put that in place, so we're gluing that down. I'm then going to take Redesign's Floral Chain Mold, and I'm going to be just casting part of that mold. You can see I've just dusted part of it, and I'm just going to work my clay into one of the little floral swags there and then pull that out. I'm going to add some of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to the back, and this is actually going to sit along the seam of the egg to hide that seam, and obviously it's going to add a nice element to our design. So I'm going to continue casting these little floral designs until I have covered up that entire seam. This project was inspired by a few different photos that I saw on Pinterest. As soon as I saw it, I thought it was definitely a project that I wanted to try and put my own spin on. Once I had everything glued down in place, I let my clay dry overnight. The next day, I came in with Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm going to paint the entire base with 2 coats of that chalk paint. If I've inspired you to try any of these Paint Couture products today, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once my 2 coats of Buttercream chalk paint were dry, I then took Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I am going to be coating the area on the egg that does not have any molds. I felt like adding it to our castings would just be a little bit too over the top, so we're just going to add it to that blank space there to give it more of a vintage vibe. When that is sticky to the touch, I'm going to come in and use Crackle Step 2, and again, just applying it in a dabbing and stippling motion. And then I let Crackle Step 2 dry for several hours. While the crackle's drying, I took my amazing casting resin and measured out equal parts A and B. I then put it in my flexible silicone cup, stirred it really well, and then I am pouring it back into that same mold that we've been using, and I'm just going to be putting it in that smaller design. While that's setting, I'm going to take my Van Dyke brown glaze and we're going to go over the top of all of those beautiful casting details and of course our crackle. So you can see I'm really working it into all of those beautiful details, and then I'm taking a wet wipe and wiping back the excess so that that glaze sits in all of those lovely details. I'm going to continue adding this to the entire base until it's completely covered. Now, if this is a little bit too grungy, it's not quite to your taste, obviously you could leave this particular step out. Maybe you would do some dry brushing if you painted the base a darker color and did a bit of a reverse. Obviously it just depends what your style is. Once my glaze was completely dry, I then took Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm just going to put a little bit on a small artist brush, and I'm going to go over the top of that sweet bow that we added. And then I'm also going to be adding it to a couple of the other details, but as I'm adding that, I'm also then coming in with my finger and just sort of dabbing off some of that excess so it's not as heavy in those sections. Just like we did with the bird, I'm now coming in with Paint Couture's Vertigreen Antiquing Glaze, and we're going to add that to some of the floral details. So I'm adding it, and then I'm taking a wet wipe and wiping back some of the excess. My vision for this piece was definitely to think about how a statue in an old English garden perhaps would age over time. It would get cracks, it would get dirty, and it would of course get moss. So that was definitely an inspiration as I was creating this. Once the glaze was dry, I then took Paint Couture's Vintage Lace Luxe Metallic Paint, and I'm just getting a little bit on my finger and I'm going to go over the top of some of the details. This is just going to give us a little bit of subtle shine. While that's drying, I'm going to take my casting out of the mold, so our resin piece is ready. I'm then going to use that same vintage lace metallic paint and coat both the front and back of this design. When the metallic paint was dry, I took some of my Luxe Bronze metallic paint and I'm just putting a little bit on my finger and I'm going to go over the top of some of the details. This piece is going to sit on top of our egg, so I'm going to take my hairdryer and heat up that resin piece so that it becomes flexible again. I'm going to work out how I'm going to mold it to the top, and then I'm going to add some of my Gorilla Super Glue gel to the underside of our resin casting. And then I'm adding a little bit to the top of the egg and then positioning it in place. I didn't have to hold it for too long, it did stick there pretty quickly. And here's our finished spring egg project. This project was a lot of fun. I definitely enjoyed trying something a little bit different. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.